Hello again, KCIW listeners, and welcome to Curry Café. I'm producer and volunteer Rick McNamer. Every Sunday from 3 to 4 p.m., your host, Ray Gary, puts together a panel of guests to discuss topics of interest in our community. Listeners can participate by texting questions or comments to 541-661-4098. Again, that text line is 541-661-4098. Now here's Ray, the famous radio personality, to tell us about today's show.
That was good.
Thank you.
You did
Didn't
good.
call you an announcer.
Now, if you listen to this program, you know that some weeks we're just kind of fumbling through with people that don't know a damn thing about what they're talking about. But today we have a unique situation. We have two people who at least claim they know quite a bit about what they're talking about. So it'll be up to you to judge at the end of it whether or not you feel like they know something or they're just phoning it in. So if we can go around the table, Kyle, we'll start out with you. Tell us the rest of your name, who you are and why you're here and what you know.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
I do not claim to know what I'm talking about. I'm just gonna.
All right, you'll fit fine.
That might be even better.
You'll be on the wall of the Hall of Fame.
That's right. I'm looking forward to that. My name's Kyle Motley. I am the Coastal Community Coordinator for the Elakha Alliance, and the Elakha Alliance is an Oregon-based nonprofit that's working to build the science and the community engagement to reintroduce a population of sea otters to the Oregon coast. And I live in Coos Bay and was happy to make the beautiful drive down to Brookings today.
Okay.
And I'm Bill Gorham, a Brookings resident for the last 8 years or so. I say I'm a retired marine biologist, but I actually should characterize it more of a recovering marine biologist because I give presentations on tide pooling and beachcombing, as well as ocean impacts from climate change and all that sort of stuff. I'm a marine biologist by training, and I will continue to talk about it. Whether it's an expert or not, I'll still talk about it.
And there is something about people in marine biology when they retire, they seem to do more work than when they were working.
Big difference is we get paid even less.
Yeah.
And marine biology does not pay well.
I have a friend.
A labor of love.
Yeah.
Who grew up on Long Island, and he was, I don't know how to describe, he had his own description, but he was very classically Jewish, even though he was an atheist, but he had the Jewish family thing, and they had a Jewish mother. And he was up here getting his doctorate in oceanography. Being a Jewish mother, she was very proud of the fact that he was becoming a doctor. So what kind of doctor is that? That's not a doctor. But anyway. That was the end of the joke. Not a joke, it was a true story.
Okay, see?
That was meant
True to life.
meant to bring tear to the eye.
When I thought I was going to get a PhD, I told my mom that even she would have to call me doctor if I it would not be Kyle to anybody, it'd be Dr. Motley.
And then when they call you that, you go, who? Oh, that's me?
Yeah. I have a sister-in-law who's a doctor. And she would have been the first Dr. Gary, except she got married, and now she's got some other damn thing.
Well, you lost out on that one, buddy.
I guess she was briefly, from the time of the degree to getting married, she was the first Dr. Gary.
Okay, we're proud of that.
Yes, we are.
Well, number one, I want to talk a little bit. I was at Kyle's presentation at SWAC, what was it, a month and a half ago, roughly?
About that, yeah.
And, of course, I'm a big whale and otter fan, my two probably favorite animals, so I was thrilled. And then, Bill, you guys are kind of tied together because your field, obviously, is the shoreline, the tide pools, the life in all of that, whether it's otters are included.
Yeah.
And, so you guys are both kind of, I would assume, fighting the same fight in a way.
Yeah, as Kyle said, he's part of Surfrider, and as he was explaining, that's a broad view on ocean preservation,
Okay.
and I would have that same perspective as well.
Okay.
It's whether you're looking at the details or looking in a broad sense. I mean, we need attention on all those. And what Kyle's doing with the Elakha Alliance and such is bringing an interesting perspective on trying to reestablish the sea otters, and he can talk to it way better than I can. Although I will say that we've got a recording of his latest talk at SWAC, and as we had mentioned before the show started, my wife was captivated by that. And
It was
so
a captivating talk.
it was a great talk. So
Yeah, I heard the presenter was extremely handsome as well. Yeah.
there you go.
More handsome than most people that I can. So, definitely than Ray. Sorry, buddy.
I don't know about that.
Just
You're picking on me today because you know I can't defend
I thought
myself.
Ray wasn't going to make it today, but he made it. Well, Kyle, if you would, maybe a little background on that Elakha Alliance.
Yeah, so we were started. We were started by a Sweats tribal member named David Hatch. He had built a boat with his son Peter, was looking for a name for that boat, and found the word Elakha in the Chinook language dictionary, which means sea otter in the Chinook language. That really sparked Dave's interest into what happened to sea otters in Oregon, whether it mattered, and like what could be done to bring them back. Unfortunately, he passed away several years ago, but people that he had talked to about his like conceptual Elakha Alliance came together to form a nonprofit. And so right now we're a coalition of Oregon's coastal tribes, conservationists, scientists, community members who are trying to really build the science and the policy and the community engagement to reintroduce sea otters to the Oregon coast. They haven't been here for over 100 years. I think the last evidence we have of a sea otter, a native Oregon sea otter, was shot in Port Orford in 1910. There's an interesting article published in the Coos Bay Times. But they were here, and they were across the North Pacific for thousands and thousands of years. But most of them, about 99% of the population worldwide, was killed for their rich fur pelts in the maritime fur trade.
Decimated by,
Russian?
to wear their pelts.
Yeah, it was Russian, American, and British ships, and people were making a lot of money off it. They have the densest fur of any animal in the world. They don't use blubber to stay warm like whales or seals or sea lions do. Instead, they have extremely dense fur, and so because of that, their pelts were worth, they say, about $15,000 in today's money. So people made a lot of money selling sea otter pelts.
So were they hunted out in this area?
Yeah, pretty much across their entire range. The only area.
I mean, we have this gap where there aren't any.
Yeah. And so sea otters have been reintroduced to Washington, British Columbia, and parts of Alaska. In the fur trade, it kind of petered out because they were hunted so extensively that you could no longer profitably hunt them. But like 12 populations survived in Alaska in really isolated areas. But somehow about 50 animals survived in Big Sur, California, which at that time must have been isolated enough to protect those animals. So the only reason California has sea otters right now is because those 50 survived in Big Sur. But they've been reintroduced to other areas, but there's about a 900-mile gap in the Pacific coast between otters in California and otters on the Olympic Peninsula.
And Big Sur, at one time, you're right, it was pretty isolated, but it's not
still is.
anymore. Yeah. Well, you say it still is, Bill?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they regularly have the slides that will cut off Highway 1.
Right, that's true,
And
too.
so,
Yeah. I'm just saying, I know that I can't think of the name of that bridge that's one of the most photographed spots in California, but they have trouble now, with summertime, especially with tourists, of everybody just packing and trying to get a photograph of that bridge and blocking traffic and yada, yada.
Yeah.
But still, I guess you're right, it still would be kind of isolated as far as people not harming the sea otter population.
When I've heard stories that like the sea otter population there was known by locals, but it took the building of that bridge for it to get out into the wider community that there were actually sea otters still in California. And after that kicked into a lot of like community groups who started and joined together to actually try to protect those otters and restore habitat. And now there's about 3,000 animals in California, but they're all descendant from that original 50. So
wow.
A very tight genetic bottleneck for all of those animals.
Well, like we were talking earlier, one positive story that we can garner, and a lot of it's not been very positive, especially now with Oregon not having any. That's pretty bizarre.
Yeah.
And I did find out at the SWAC meeting, it would embarrass me a little bit. I was talking to somebody before that meeting of how, I saw a sea otter one time at Crissy Field where the windchuck comes in. But as much as I love otters forever, I found out that I was wrong. And you pointed out that the difference is the otter I saw at Crissy Field at the windchuck was big, but it was bounding along like a I don't know, like a dog, but it couldn't have been a sea otter because they have the flippers in the back rather than the...
Yeah, and they are very awkward on land. They spend almost their entire life in the ocean, like in the water. People do confuse the two. I mean, because river otters will go onto the beach. They will go into some sea stacks. They will swim in the ocean looking for fish. Sea otters will go into estuaries, so their habitats do overlap.
Okay.
And without sea otters here, like you are not the only person in Oregon who thinks
I wasn't the only dummy?
Yeah. We hear it all the time.
Okay.
I saw a sea otter.
We
I saw a
talked
sea
at
otter,
the
yeah.
SWAT meeting.
So the river otters get as big as sea otters?
No, but they still can get pretty big. Sea otter, it can be about, especially up in Alaska, it can be like the size of like a German Shepherd in the water, so they get pretty big. I think they're usually about 2 to 3 times weigh 2 to 3 times as much as a river otter, but river otters can still get pretty big.
Yeah. So, Bill, what do you see like in the, you patrol, I don't know if that's the right word, but most of Oregon, but you go down into California also to look at the tide pool and the whole ocean side area.
Well, most of it is here locally in Brookings.
Oh, okay.
I spend the time on the beaches.
Okay.
I spend much of the time on the beach is walking our dogs. So that they are the most spoiled dogs in the world. I'll admit that. But I figured that they're about 7 years old, probably 300 out of 365 days a year on the beach. Wow. Comes out to about 4,000 walks on the beach, which is the basis for my talk about tide pooling and beachcombing here.
Okay. Okay. I was just wondering if you could notice a difference. Well, you weren't around over 100 years ago when they were here, but what you could maybe imagine, let's say the sea otters hopefully do get reintroduced here. Do you foresee a big change? We talked about the kelp, number one, change in the area.
We talked about the kelp at some point. Maybe we should talk about it now to explain what you're talking about, or is that what we were about to do?
Well, along with the otters, the sea otters interacting with the kelp, with the urchins, with all the mollusks and that type of thing. In other words, if they were introduced, do you see a very positive influence?
There's a very good possibility of that. I mean, it's interesting going back. There's an issue of what's a baseline? And a baseline is, what do we have? If we go out and we take a survey of how many purple urchins are there, how many abalone are there, how many sea otters are there, and say, well, that's our baseline, except that you go back 20 years, you go back 200 years, and it's a different baseline. And so if you go back way before the fur traders were here, where there were plenty of otters, then you go, well, what would a population of abalone have been at the time? Once the otters were gone, then the abalone went crazy. Man, that's why there was enough abalone for an abalone fisheries. There are no abalone here because of a variety of reasons, because that now with various different changes that have happened, especially the wasting diseases for the starfish, the urchins are in very high numbers. And so the baseline shifts, and we haven't been around enough, and nobody was taking data before the fur traders wiped out the urchins or the sea otters.
Yeah.
And so trying to say what had it been like, what was it like, what is it like now, it's very dynamic. We do know that because the sea otters are a primary predator, they are the top predator in the food chain, they are very, very important for an overall balance of the system. And Kyle, you've done in your lectures, you did a good talk about what a role they play.
Yeah, and I really like that idea of the shifting baseline. And if there's an amazing book written by local author Ann Velisis up in Port Orford on abalone, it's called Abalone, and she talks a lot about that, about how abalone, especially in California, was like this cultural thing, right?
Oh, it was huge
California,
down there.
yeah,
quite a while.
It was huge, and that was a result of the lack of sea otters in that area, right? And so, but if you would go back 200, 300, 400 years, that's a different baseline. And even now, when I first came to the Oregon coast, I came out here and I was like, wow, this is such a pristine, beautiful, intact system, especially coming from growing up in Pennsylvania and going to the Jersey Shore. That was my beach, was going to the Jersey Shore. Coming out here was wow. And that was post blob, post kelp die-off, post purple urchin, recruitment. Yeah. So even when I saw it, was still very much out of balance. But like my baseline was that, like, wow, this is incredible, and I think it's really interesting. It's like you're saying, it's very dynamic.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to work in. And I got into ecology and marine biology because I wanted to work with plants and animals and natural systems. But like, I would say 90% of it is actually working with people, right? And like, that's the big issue in most ecological problems is the social, the political, the economic part, and how all that tags into like those baselines that people have.
Yeah.
Boy, what a murky place that can be, too. I mean, I can only imagine, God, I had it. Something, well, it slipped my mind, so I'll come back to it. So go ahead, Bill. I think you were going to say something.
You had asked about where I'd work, but I spent a lot of time down at Hopkins Marine Station in Monterey, and so and I got to swim up close with otters to the extent that I was diving once, and one sort of came up closer and closer to me, and as it looked, it's the size of a German Shepherd, 6 inches from your nose, and so I bopped it on its nose and did not like it. It backed up and gave me a very dirty look. Later in the dive, I felt something on my back. I got to the surface after the dive, and my snorkel was gone. So the little bugger stole my snorkel. He got the revenge, and so they are very smart. They know what's going on, and so
and so they're not quite the cute puppies we all imagine them to be.
Oh, they're gorgeous puppies. They're incredibly cute.
No, I guess I was going personality-wise. Maybe they were.
No,
They're
playful.
Oh, yeah.
and they're friendly. They're curious.
Oh,
But he, I hit him on the nose, and he stole my snorkel. So I guess fair battle.
Months after that, there were probably reports of sea otter swimming along with a snorkel.
Yeah.
That I wouldn't
was
doubt it.
wondering
Traded
if
in with
this might be some evolutionary move or something. You may have changed the whole whole fiber of their existence. But
That's
anyway.
where that baseline comes in. What was pre-snorkel and post-snorkel? So
the biggest story out of like Santa Cruz for a while, I think it was last year, maybe the year before, was Otter 841, the otter who was climbing onto people's surfboards, kicking surfers off their surfboards and then eating all the foam off of them.
Oh, no.
And she was doing that for like a couple months, and Fish and Wildlife Service actually like tried to capture her. They would hide a boat behind some rocks, and they would put out a decoy surfer. They'd have a surfer out there on a foam board. She would climb on the board, kick the surfer off, just hanging out, chewing on the foam, and they'd swoop in to capture her, and she escaped like 3 times. So she's, as far as I know,
They never got her?
I think she's still out there terrorizing surfers.
Marty.
Living on a diet of foam?
But I don't know what it is about the foam that she loved. But I was down there and I saw a couple people had shirts that had her on there with the surfboard that said locals only on it. And I thought that was really well done.
Well, and Bill, you brought up Monterey, and we've talked about this before in other places and venues, I guess, but I wanted to talk about that very positive sea otter story with the Elkhorn Slough that was down, because I've been whale watching out of Monterey, out of Moss Landing twice. What a great place.
Yeah.
What a wonderful thing to do. But how, and you could explain it better, but how they were having trouble with the green crabs that were just going crazy. And they didn't really plant the sea otters there, but they just started coming in the estuary and taking care of that problem, basically.
Well, because they are very active predators and they love crabs. As it turns out, the green crabs are an invasive species, and they're occurring up here as well.
Yeah, Coos Bay has a
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. And so that kind of crab, I thought you had mentioned that was one of the motivations to try to reintroduce the otters up here.
Yeah, I mean, there's the classic example, like we touched on a little bit before, is the kelp issue, right? Like where there are sea otters in California, they have not seen the drastic losses of bull kelp that Northern California has and Oregon has. So as a top predator of purple urchins, they limit the number of urchins. Those urchins don't devour kelp forests. It's similar in estuaries with green crab and also the benefits to eelgrass. They're able to exert that top-down predation and help everything that uses those systems kind of flourish. And they've done, there's like one paper I think of that I've read that talked about their diet of European green crab, and apparently they're doing a number on European green crabs down there.
From what I understand, the otters they're not going to be eliminating the green crabs because they won't go into the fresh water, but they're up in the estuary, and that's where the people that are studying it recognize that there's they are very specific about what they do, but they're not trying to get rid of all the crabs, but they'll only go in a certain amount of the fresher water, brackish water.
And that's another one I was going to ask. You had talked about that the river otters kind of inhabit both salt and fresh water, or can.
They will like hunt and forage in salt or brackish water.
But the sea otters, they will not go into any like a river.
They go pretty far up Elkhorn Slough. They haul out several miles. Like
oh wow!
I don't know what the salinity is there, but
yeah, that's what I.
But that is really like one of the only, for the longest time, sea otters were thought of as like a near shore rocky reef kelp driven species. But that population in Elkhorn Slough, who lives almost their entire lives in that slough, has kind of changed a lot of people's understandings of like how sea otters use estuaries. And
wow!
So I don't know what salinity they kind of need, but they will go pretty far up into estuaries.
Yeah. And well, maybe that's a question for you, because I even wonder when I go down to I live right next to the Smith River where it dumps into the ocean, or the estuary, if you will. I have always wondered how far the salinity can go up the rivers. Do you have, I'm sure there's no formula, but depending on the tides and everything.
There are a lot of factors that'll affect it. The tides are one. It's the bottom, sort of the topography of the bottom, if you will.
Okay.
If it's very steep, they can't go very far up. So there are a lot of factors. The other thing about Elkhorn Slough, as I understand it, some of the areas, because there was farming and there was a lot of changing of the marshes to accommodate farming, some of the areas that have reverted to sort of the natural condition still are much more freshwater than they would have normally been had there been had the areas not been disturbed for farming.
Okay.
So that kind of changes where things you might think would have been a normal salinity, something they could tolerate, but because of human intervention, it's changed. And I don't know of anybody that's studied it as to what the tolerance of the animals. But the real take-home is that they're very adaptable. Again, I think they're very smart animals.
Yeah.
And so they know what they're doing and accommodating a very, very harsh environment.
Yeah, and in that area, I'm guessing Castroville, which is very close, that's probably part of that whole system there. And there's a lot of farming there with the artichokes and other crops, I would say.
And from what I've read, it's one of the more polluted estuaries in California. Elkhorn Slough is.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's not surprising at all because of the agriculture there, the runoff and such. So that's an issue.
Okay.
So.
And by the way, I hear a phone, but that's okay. It reminds me of our text line. If you have a question or comment, please text it 541-661-4098.
So I'm curious.
Go ahead.
So you've been working in Oregon in marine biology for most of your career?
No, actually, I moved up here when I retired in 2017.
Okay.
But I've spent most of my time in California, although we lived for 2 years in Australia, lived in the Caribbean for 5 years in St. Thomas, have worked in a lot of different places, worked up in Canada. So it's a variety of things. It's all been focused on environmental issues, environmental permitting in particular. So that's what for my focus has been. But I've always tried to have it as a marine focus.
I was wondering if maybe you were here for the blob. And when we're talking about the blob, we're talking about the marine heat wave that happened in like 2013, the majority 2014,
right,
and some in 2015, which like caused mass die-offs of sunflower sea stars, like rising ocean temperatures, mass die-offs of kelp, and without sea otters to prey on urchins, and then without sunflower sea stars, which also prey on urchins, that's kind of like led to this issue we have now of kelp forests being devoured by purple urchins. Were you in California when that happened? Like, where were you in the 2014?
Let's see. At that point, I was working up in Canada, in British Columbia.
Still experienced.
Yeah. And so, but that I think is a really good example of, and tying it back to climate change, is that New York Times has an article within the last month, certainly, where it shows they have a graphic that shows the changes in ocean temperatures since 2000. And you look at it between 2000 and 2010, there's slight variations. 2010 to 2015, you start to see some things. You see the blobs show up, and it shows a picture of all the Earth's oceans, and it puts the spots on it, and it calls out the blob, which was, again, it's 20, what was it, 20?
I think 2014 was the main year for those like high temperatures with the blob.
Yeah. And that had such an impact on so many areas, because when you look at it, it's not just off Oregon or California. It was around so much of the Pacific and such. And then, of course, now the last 2 years were the highest temperatures in the ocean that have been recorded, and it's continuing on that way. And the number of marine heat waves that are going on and the magnitude is what's doing a number on the coral reefs. And it's affecting other things, because there are a lot of animals that can't tolerate high temperatures, especially if they're in warmer waters, because they're already living at the upper level of their thermal tolerance. So,
boy, it makes me feel a little ignorant, but this blob, I don't even remember hearing about. Of course, I was a Valley resident at the time, but still, I didn't realize it was that intense. And again, not worldwide, or was it worldwide?
Well, if I understand it, the blob was specifically talking about the Pacific.
Yeah,
the Pacific.
Yeah, I think ocean temperatures are rising worldwide, but when people talk about the blob, they're talking about the North Pacific marine heat wave.
Okay.
And it's interesting. I gave a talk to the Oregon South Coast Fishermen's Association. I always put it pre-COVID, post-COVID. So I was talking with them, and it was interesting how many people, as I was talking about marine heat waves, are going, oh yeah, and that's when the tuna were really close to shore, and you can find things that you never found out here, species that you would expect to be off Baja, they were up here. And so when the oceans heat up, there are a variety of things that happen, one of which is the water can't hold as much oxygen, and so that drives issues. When animals, because it's hotter, they will move to where it's cooler, which is okay, except that if you're a local predator and you can't be very mobile, and your prey or something that preys on you moves out of the area, or the timing is, everything can get messed up, because the systems are very finely tuned together, because they're complex with that. And that's why when you have a top predator that's not there, or it has to move away, then the cascade effects are not real easy to understand, because, again, nature's pretty good at adapting, but then it's kind of like when our body systems get a little too hot, or you get a little too much salt, or you get out of kilter, other things happen. So, and that's the problem that so many people have in terms of climate change. Oh, well, it's just one thing. It's like, no. As soon as you have a lot of extra heat in the system, or the other part of it is you have carbon dioxide that goes in the air, goes in the ocean, and that becomes an acidic ocean. There are so many impacts from that. It all ties in together. So
I think the hard thing, particularly about like communicating climate change to people, is like this idea of it's in the future, and like you don't see it now. But like, I think if you can tie it into like affecting people now, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but like the problems with like domoic acid and shellfish is because of warming water temperatures and lack of dissolved oxygen, right? Is that true?
absolutely.
And that's, I mean, Oregon's like fisheries on our coast are our biggest economic driver outside of tourism. Like people like eat that food. Like that is climate changes in the future. That's happening right now.
That's right.
Right.
And it's interesting. We told us, Kyle had mentioned about the sea otter in Santa Cruz that was eating the foam, pushing off the surfers. This last year, a combination of domoic acid and extra heat, and possibly with the fire retardant that was used for the fighting the fires in Pacific, especially in the Palisades, that's gone an enrichment. So domoic acid, they've had incredibly high levels of it, which has made some of there's a picture of the wedge in Huntington Beach, I think it is.
The wedge?
Yeah.
I think it's Newport Pier.
No.
I think it's Newport, yeah.
And there's videos of sea lions that are chasing the surfers out of the water because they're attacking them. And that's an aspect about domoic acid is that it affects their nervous system, and so it drives them crazy. And so it's killing the fish. The fish that are filter feeders are the herring and such. And so then the sea lions will eat those, and they will, just like eating crabs or eating the mussels, you get concentrations, and it does get up to the higher predators. And so whales, dolphins, sea lions have all have died. And if they're not dead, they are going crazy and doing weird things. So the consequences go far beyond just a simple, if we were to go eat the crabs, then we would be affected. That's just what we're eating. So,
And this is not something we're talking about 50 years from now. 50 years from now, we're talking about right now.
we're absolutely.
Well, and as a matter of fact, this year, which saddened me, probably saddened a lot of people greatly, they were noticing a lot of whale die-offs. I know in the San Francisco Bay,
Correct.
especially. I don't know if that could have been part of what we're talking about or not. Don't know.
The real challenge is that, getting the carcasses, getting the animals that have been affected when they're out in the ocean. Very rarely do they wash up on shore. And so it's not like in the woods where you can go out and try to find animals that have died and such. Collecting the information is very, very difficult. And there's so many complexities to it. But Kyle, I think you hit on one of the most important things, because for the longest time, climate change, we don't want to let the polar bears die. It's like, well, the polar bears are up there. They're a charismatic megafauna. People are really worried about, they love the ocean, love the whales and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's the things that are close to home. It's not in the future. It's happening right now.
Yeah.
And just the fires, the floods, all of these things, which are tied in together. And it is very easy to dismiss it as something in the future, someplace else. It's something that's not going to affect us. Just had to pay my house insurance, and it went up 30% or 15%. And it's like, okay, what's the standard of living going? Did it go up 15%? Mm-hmm. No. And that's one of the things that people are really going to start waking up and being worried about, because as the insurance companies that I know they really care about me, about my business, my money. And so they're not going to lose money. They're going to keep raising things, and it will cascade, because as they raise their rates and don't issue policies, as has happened plenty of times in California and elsewhere, then the mortgages, the bankers will say, you have to have insurance. You don't have insurance, we're not giving you a mortgage. And so that can affect the housing market, and that can cascade through. I do recall a few years ago where there was some issues about mortgages. I think it had an effect on the economies. Oh, yeah. Sorry for the understatement, but those are the sorts of things that are they're gonna see the immediacy of it, the breadth of it, and say, oh wait, that's not what I signed up for. So that's a really important point about the timeliness.
Yeah, I mean, and like money talks, right? And like,
absolutely. How
do you get that message out? And I, for the longest time, especially like going to college and grad school and thinking about like ecology and environmental justice and all that, and like I for so long hesitated to. Like, you're familiar with like ecosystem services, right? The valuing of what a tree does for fresh water, the valuing of what a reef does for tourism, like putting money on it. I was so hesitant with that at first, because I was like, these things have intrinsic value, right? Like they deserve to be there because just like we deserve to be here, right? They have intrinsic value. But I feel like you can really maybe make some people who otherwise wouldn't listen to some of those arguments if you can tie dollar values onto it, and it's like you're saying, if people are seeing their insurance rates rise because of increased fire risk associated with climate change, right? Like that's going to get, I would imagine that would get more people listening to like the climate justice and the climate change. I think it would get more people to the table.
Right.
Well, and I do know, coming from central or north central California, up here in the very northern end now, but a lot of my friends and family everybody down around the Sacramento area love to move to the foothills, and I know why. But a lot of people now, they don't even have fire insurance.
Right.
They can't afford it. And some have had to sell. I mean, it's pretty drastic.
How do you?
And that's where the people can worry about the dollars. I don't know. I've never understood the people that just flat want to. I don't know if they deny climate change or they just don't want to hear about it. But I know when that's brought up, it turns a lot of people off. But it affects us all.
And that's where, until they have something specifically affecting them, like paying your insurance bill, and you go, wait a second, what's going on? But it is very, very challenging to get people to talk about it.
Yeah.
And that's why, a show like this is important, just to get people to have the conversation. But it is very, very, very difficult to do. If you want to be a pariah, bring it up. Hey, I want to talk about climate. What? I think that
door-to-door sales.
You will get nobody buying you a beer at the
Door in there. Yeah.
that's right.
Hey, before I forget, I'm not sure we even mentioned it once this show. We do have a way you can participate if you want. We have a text line, and we have operators standing by to take care of those texts when they come in. And the number is The number is 541-661-4098. 541-661-4098.
And we want to remind everybody, of course, you're listening to KCIW LP 100.7 FM, beautiful Brookings, Oregon. And man, are we glad we have the guests we have today. And I have to go, I want to go back real quick. Well, not go back, we haven't talked about it yet. I don't think the reintroduction of the sea otters, Kyle, in 1970, that was I guess a complete failure or disaster. How did that work?
It definitely did not succeed.
Okay. And why? Well, we'll find out.
So, as I mentioned before, sea otters have been reintroduced to Washington, British Columbia, and parts of Southeast Alaska. What was happening was there was some atomic bomb testing being scheduled for an island in the Aleutians called Amchitka Island. Fish and Wildlife Service and Alaska Fish and Game wanted to relocate the sea otters that were on that island. And at that point, there were no sea otters in British Columbia. There were no sea otters in Washington. There were none in Oregon, even though all those states and provinces historically had a population. So they took those animals and they reintroduced them there. They put 450 into Southeast Alaska, I think like 150 into British Columbia, another 100 into like the Olympic Peninsula in Washington, and then they brought 50 to Port Orford and 40 to Coos Bay here in Oregon. And all the other reintroductions were a success. The Washington population got to very low numbers and almost kind of petered out. But what they found out when they did this reintroduction, which were the first actual sea otter reintroductions ever, was that if you wild capture 100 animals and we put them right out here in front of Brookings, immediately half of them want to leave. They want to go back to where they're from.
Wow.
And so if you're putting 50 animals into Coos Bay, 50 animals into Port Orford and 40 into Coos Bay, you are quickly getting to two populations that are so limited in number that any kind of weather event, shark mortality, skewed male to female ratio could just end that population. And it did. Those sea otters survived in Oregon for about 10 years. I think like 7 pups were born over the course of those 10 years. But the numbers just sank so low that it was no longer really feasible for those populations. And, I'm not going to sit here and badmouth the people who did it. I think they were operating off the best current science. But it was a little bit of like a shoot from the hip approach. Like they needed to get those animals out of that area. And so they brought them down.
Fast, right?
Yeah.
So
and they flew them into Coos Bay Airport and to the airport outside of Port Orford. And when they were trying to release them, they encountered like really bad weather. They had to dump the animals into open water instead of taking them to the areas where they were going to habituate them for a couple of days. So like it was a very basic understanding of like how reintroductions actually work with sea otters, and then just some bad luck caused the Oregon population to not work.
Wow.
In Alaska, we occasionally would have problems with a bear, and Fish and Game used to relocate them. And after a while, they were realizing that it wasn't doing much good because it it would be just like taking one of us without a credit card or an ID or anything and dropping them in a foreign city. And the bear was, it had its little places where it went and did things, and now they're gone. So I wonder if that's the type of thing that may have affected this whole population they tried to move.
For sure. And there's some people who think that, because the sea otter reintroduction in Washington, that those numbers got so low that people, it's a similar thing. They think they put 100 in, half of them immediately left. There are people who are like, well, if we put them here in Oregon and half of them left, like if they're going back, they're going north. Yeah. Was that like a buffer that actually made the Washington reintroduction succeed? Because all of a sudden you have 40 to 50 animals from Oregon moving up the coast. Maybe that helped that population eventually kind of succeed. And it is successful. There's about 3,000 animals now on the Olympic Peninsula.
And so what about the island that they were going to do the atomic testing, I suppose? Did they figure any of them made it all the way back to there?
I don't know. That's a long
trek.
But I mean, they're not migratory. They really like to stay in like a small central home area. Like it's usually naturally young males who are leaving populations to look for mates.
Okay.
So, I think
that happens human.
Yeah, it happened. I mean, dating on the Oregon coast is rough. So I totally understand. Yeah.
Well, if you have a success, let me know. Okay.
Well, that's three of us, I think, at this table can relate to that.
The lifespan of a sea otter and river otter, what's the difference?
I don't know about river otters. I know sea otters in captivity can live like 20 to 25 years. And in the wild, I think it's a lot less than that.
Okay.
But I don't know exact numbers. And I don't know for river otters. I don't know if you do, Bill.
No idea on that. God. I wouldn't doubt, I would guess between 5 and 10 years, maybe.
For a river otter?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
They're smaller and life's tough.
Life's tough, but I enjoy them. I see a lot of them when I go down to the boat ramp, if you will, at Smith River. It's in that trailer park area, but it's right near where the mouth is. And I have witnessed a lot of fun stuff there. I saw a couple one time right near the beach on the rocks, diving in these rocks and pulling up these long, hideous-looking eels and slapping those eels around and going for a big. I mean, it was amazing. Yeah. And now these are river otters again. Now that I know, but and then I think I've seen as many as maybe 8 to 10. Because it's hard to count when they're bobbing up and down swimming, and they're the little pups and everything. It's just like we said, they're a cute animal to watch. That's for sure.
But they're a little nasty. Like they're known to like attack people. Not in large quantities, but there's a woman in Montana. There was a newspaper article from like ABC News or something that said otter sends women to hospital on life flight, and they used a photo of a sea otter. And I remember my executive director, I called him and was like, "This is in Montana. You're using the wrong species."
Well, these days it kind of doesn't matter on the news.
Well, I hope we got that thing back where it came from. Did ICE get after it and send it back to?
But isn't that a problem too, though? And I'll go back to Montana a little bit. How many times do we hear tourists wanting to go up and either pet a buffalo or whatever, a bear? I mean, it happens. We humans don't have a great record, I guess, of I don't know about general, but reintroducing or trying to help species out.
Yeah.
Like you said, trying to do that one in Alaska that didn't quite work out so well.
The human disturbance is a big factor in Elkhorn Slough. They think that the sea otters in Elkhorn Slough are the most disturbed sea otters in the world because there's so easy access. Sea otters stay warm without blubber through their dense fur and through eating. So if they're not eating, they're resting. And so if people are actively bothering them, they are expending energy that they could be using to keep themselves warm. And so they're having to feed more. They're having to move around more. And so it doesn't seem like going up 10 feet from a sea otter is going to have any bad effects to it, but it can have really terrible effects for populations, especially when they're continuously disturbed, like in Elkhorn Slough and areas around there.
Well, right. And like I said, when I went whale watching out of there, I mean, that Moss Landing is a little place, but it's really close to Monterey. So there was a lot of activity in their little harbor there. Mm-hmm. And that's where we, saw them. And of course, that is right there near Elkhorn Slough. Right. And well, then of course there's the Monterey Bay Aquarium, and I think the sea otters are one of the main attractions there.
Yeah, and Monterey Bay Aquarium does some amazing work with sea otter conservation. Like their
believe so,
surrogacy,
yeah.
their surrogacy program is amazing. They take in stranded sea otter pups, and if they're young enough, they feed them with what they call the Darth Vader suit, where they wear like full black, like Darth Vader outfits, so the pup doesn't get accustomed to humans. And then when they get a little bit bigger, they have captive like mothers raise them, and then they re-release them out into the wild. And a lot of those captively raised pups have gone into Elkhorn Slough.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you mentioned shark predation. I'm going to go a little bit out of the realm a little bit, though, but I know you're a surfer, and I always think of...
So that made you
white,
think
man.
of shark predation?
Yeah, it makes me think of shark predation too.
Can we see your arms? Yeah.
I got them all.
But do we have great white populations up here in Oregon?
Yep.
I didn't think that they went really that far north.
Yep.
They go wherever they want.
Yeah.
I'll let it go, man.
They're
we're-
cold weather fish, basically.
Where there's marine
Cold
mammals,
water.
like Simpson Reef
Yeah.
in like near Coos Bay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a shark encounter surfing a couple months ago.
And you go back in?
Yeah, I stopped after that for a couple days. But
Well, how did that go? How did you see this?
there is a sea lion at this one spot in Coos Bay who he hangs out there, and he likes to show you who's boss. Like he'll buzz your board, he'll bark at you, he'll flap.
Wow.
And he was making a bunch of ruckus, and we thought he was just like, staking his claim. And my friend looked down, and he was just missing the lower half of his body. He was like actively dying in the water.
Oh.
And then we came back the next day, and he was washed up, and there's a big bite mark. And this was like 10 feet from us, and I never paddled so fast to the...
Well, I think that would cure me forever, but
Yeah. And they're out there. And
Amazing.
Yeah, we got some big ones up here.
wow.
Speaking of predation, I know a couple of years ago, and I don't know if it's continued, but they were having a problem with orcas attacking otter rafts.
Yeah, there's like one area in Alaska that like the orcas have switched to preying on sea otters, and I don't think many people know why, because orcas are similar to sharks that are going for blubber, that high calorie
Yeah.
content. But in this one area, sea otters no longer are in the ocean. They only stay in this bay on this island because the orca predation has become so bad. I don't think I've not heard any like
I would think
analysis of why that is.
an otter raft would be a pretty easy picking.
Yeah, I guess.
Sleep up and maybe get 2 or 3 at the same
Yeah, just
time.
one big mouthful of like 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Well, and that's another animal on my bucket list that I haven't seen yet, and I know that they are around. Somebody has photographed them right in the harbor a couple of times.
Yeah, they come into Coos Bay and Uquinna Bay estuaries.
So you've seen them there.
I saw them once at like the Mill Casino in Coos Bay, and the sea lions in there were going absolutely nuts. Like that was the big indicator, because it's usually like word of mouth. People start calling, oh, there's orcas in the bay. And I went to the Mill Casino to watch them, and I could hear the sea lions going crazy.
Well,
and then I
could see why.
saw them. Yeah.
I could see why. Yeah. Now, I did hear also, I don't know if this is true or not, but they have never had a documented attack on humans, orcas,
Not
in the
that I've
wild,
heard of.
which kind of blows
They
my
won't
mind,
together.
but
Well, yeah, I haven't heard of it.
I wouldn't be swimming with them.
They had such a horrible reputation for attacking people and eating people in boats and all that kind. It turns out
I've never
at least the last thing I read,
I've
it's
never
not true.
heard that.
They've
What I
never-
have heard is that off of Portugal,
They're attacking boats.
They're attacking. I've seen videos of that. I mean, they were doing a number on some of these boats,
Yeah.
man.
It was the same time that Otter 841 was chewing on surfboards. So a lot of people were like, animal revolution. They're rising up.
There was speaking of orcas, there was a country, a little whaling village. I don't remember where it was, where apparently the orcas would come at night or whenever and let the people know that there were whales for them to go out and hunt. And the only thing the orcas got out of this is the whalers did not take the tongue. They left the tongue for the...
How were these orcas communicating that?
They'd come in and they'd splash and make all kinds of noise just offshore, waking people up. And this is, as far as I know, it's true. It happened a long time ago, so the actual
Was it
details
on YouTube?
may be a little muddy. No, it wasn't YouTube. No.
Well, along with all of this, I hate to do it because love otters, but there is a Debbie Downer. I know that there are some elements out there that don't want the sea otters returned, and some of it is, I guess, the commercial fishermen and not and the regular fishermen, because they are such voracious eaters. But it's hard for me to believe that that we could. How do I put this? That I can't even think of the words. We've decimated them so and got rid of them that they're going to be mad that they come back and have a few of their fish. I don't see the connection.
It is. So sea otters eat like 116 different species. A lot of them are not of any economic value for like commercial fishing, but some of them are big economic drivers. In Oregon, it's the Dungeness crab fishery. It's the biggest economic fishery in the state. It supports a lot of jobs and economic growth in our coastal communities. Sea otters definitely eat Dungeness crab. In Southeast Alaska, when sea otters were reintroduced, those numbers went from about 450 to I think there's around 30,000 sea otters there now. And that's just because if you think of Southeast Alaska, it's islands, it's fjords, it's inlets, it's sea otter heaven. It's like they have multiple dimensions that they can spread to. But 30,000 sea otters eating 30% of their body weight every day, like that can do a number on certain shellfish, and particularly ones that people make money off of and people like to eat. So there is, I think, a valid concern among Dungeness crab industry in Oregon, and it's not everybody. Some people don't think it's going to be a big deal. Some people do. But I think the concern is valid that, like, what does a reintroduction of sea otters to Oregon mean to how I make a living?
And I certainly get that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I do get that.
But at the same time, before the fur trade, the best guess we have on the amount of sea otters in Oregon was 4,000. We would probably never get up to 4,000 again with just how things have changed. So I don't think there'll be the numbers in Oregon that there are in Alaska to have that much of an impact. I do think that there will be certain boats, some guys that I know who are fishing, setting pots closer to shore, who might see some impact. Most of the fleet that I talk to is fishing at depths that sea otters don't
not
really
there.
At. But so I do think there will be like local impacts to certain operations. I don't see the huge widespread impacts that people in Alaska have seen, but I also don't make a living and support a family setting crab pots. So it's hard I can't predict the future.
Right.
I think that the calculus comes out where the benefits outweigh the negatives, but I definitely have a vested interest.
That's the way I would view it too. So obviously for Kyle, what about you, Bill? I mean, do you see an overall positive if the sea otters are returned to significant numbers?
It's a lot of it's up in the air, in that knowing that the sea otters would be taking the purple sea urchins and assuming that would then allow for the young kelp to settle and get bigger, and so we have a return of the kelp beds. That's going to affect the fish, so that we're going to have a reestablishment of a better ecosystem out there. And so because we don't know what's happening at the different levels, I think that Kyle is correct as anybody can be, in that we think that this is what's going to happen, because right now things are in such turmoil. We don't know, except we do know that it's really a problem. And so if we lose more of the kelp, then what else is going to be lost? So the fishermen that are harvesting the fish that are near shore are going to be, and they'll be a big benefit if they get the kelp back. And it might be the recreational more than the commercial ones, but it's that balance. There's so many different moving parts to it. And then you add into it the climate change. And it's not only the additional heat, but it's the acidification. And if you have a more acid ocean, you have things that need calcium carbonate to build their shells, which would be oysters and clams. You also have pteropods, which are really neat little swimming snails. And a small change in the pH means the pteropods go away. Well, the pteropods are a primary food of salmon, of a variety of other predatory fish that are out there. And that means that the fish aren't going to get what they need, and so that's going to affect it. So there are all these different combinations of things that need to be considered. So making predictions is challenging, and I think, as Kyle said, that the original introduction was oh crap, we've got a really big issue coming, because if they set off this bomb, we're going to lose all these animals. What can we do? And I give them all the credit in the world. That's the best possible solution in a really bad last-minute case. Once again, nature gets pushed off to the side. If it weren't for some people going, let's see what we can preserve. I think that it takes the conversation, monitoring, and various things like that to see what's right, because we know we have problems, and that is as good a solution than most, and probably it's as good as any and better than most.
Yeah, boy, and so many unknowns out there, and I mean, I hate to bring politics into it, but I will a little bit. And let's face it, in this administration, any fight that we're talking about to either reintroduce or talk about climate change, it's an uphill battle right now.
Right.
Yeah.
And wouldn't you say, I think climate change is a huge impact on all of this stuff that we're talking about.
Right. It's an impact on the natural environment, but as we were talking about with the mortgages and uninsurability, the rising costs, that's cascading in a way that it's affecting humans in a way that they'll say, well, maybe what these people are talking about has some validity. Maybe we should be doing something. And it does bring up the question of, can we afford to deny the existence of climate change? And I know I'm trying to set up to give a 3 or 4 lecture explanation of what's the basics from. It was 1827 that it was first described that carbon dioxide traps heat. And so we've known for almost 200 years. And so the physics is there, the science is there. It's to the point of the projections that were made by the Exxon scientists in the 1970s and 80s, which basically said, we're going to get more extreme weather. We're going to have more floods, more of this. They're basically saying what's on the weather right now, what's on the news right now.
It's happening right now.
It's happening
all of
right
that
now.
stuff.
And they sat on that for like decades. Right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's the sort of thing that after the scientists were shut up, then it was the PR people that said, oh, we're not sure. We're not as, which is the same tactic that the cigarette people did. Mm-hmm. This is the tobacco industry.
I saw a thing the other day. In the past, we've always heard that 97% of the world scientists believe that climate change is man-caused, and now that's been updated to like 99.7% or something.
I hate to say this, but we are almost out of time. So I wanted to get from Kyle for sure, how can people support, learn, and more about the Elakha Alliance?
Yeah, we have an amazing website, elakhaalliance.org. That's ELAKHA, or OregonSeaOtters.com, or you type in Oregon Sea Otters in Google, we will come up. We have every study we publish, everything we have is there available for free. We have great social media that my coworker Chanel puts on. So Facebook, Instagram, I don't know any of the other ones. I don't really use
TikTok. I hate to use TikTok. I don't know if
we have TikTok, but
yeah,
we have a bunch of them. We do a lot of events. I do a lot of presentations, tabling, stuff like this. So please reach out. We're happy to, even if you just want to get a beer or a coffee and talk about sea otters.
That sounds great, man. All right. Well, I want to thank both of you guys for being here. It was a great show. Like to have you back next week. Maybe we'll find out. We'll try. All right. Thank you guys. And thank everybody for listening. KCIW LP 100.7 FM, beautiful Brookings, Oregon. Adios till next week.